Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that I be...
Senator from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to enter into a colloquy with my Republican colleague, Marco Rubio, for up to 20 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, it is an honor to be here with my esteemed colleague from Florida, Senator Marco Rubio. My husband Joe and I are blessed to be the parents of two wonderful children, our daughter Kate, who's 6 years old, and our son Jacob, who is 3 years old. This 4th of July, we walked together as a family in the parade in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. As I watched my children in the parade hand out candy to other New Hampshire children while they were standing with their parents, it reminded me again of why I am here and how concerned I am about the future of our country for Kate and Jacob and for all of our children. As parents, we all want to provide our children with a brighter future and at least the same, if not greater, opportunities than we have all had in the greatest country on earth. That is the American dream. That a young woman like me from a middle-class family can have the opportunity to serve in this chamber, that someone like Senator Rubio, the son of Cuban immigrants, could serve as a senator from Florida, a leader of our great country who has come here to address our challenges. I am fearful that we are the first generation who will not pass on the American dream to the next generation. With the accumulation of $14 trillion in debt, we're borrowing 40 cents on the dollar just to fund our government. Half of our debt we have borrowed from other countries, including the country of China, a country that does not share our values. I'm concerned with the amount of debt that we have accumulated, that if we do not address this debt crisis right here and now, that we are ensuring that our children will have less opportunities than we have all had. We have seen what is happening in Greece. If we do not address our debt with real, substantive, legislative proposals, things that we have already proposed in this chamber, members of both sides of the aisle, the balanced budget amendment, a spending cap legislation, how about a real budget resolution that reduces spending and puts forth a responsible fiscal plan for this country? We will be setting up our children to pay for our failure to act today with either massive tax increases or the value of our dollar will be diminished and everything that they own will be worth less than everything that we own. And it will diminish their economic opportunities in this great country. Senator Rubio, I know that you're also the father of 4 young children. What is it that you are most concerned about with respect to the future of our great country?
Well, first, I want to thank the senator from New Hampshire for allowing us the opportunity to do this together. I think this is important. She brings a tremendous amount of credibility to this discussion. She's not just a mother and a senator, but she's also a small business owner who's run a small business or been there in the front lines with her husband running a small business, who recently got off the campaign trail as I did and heard from job creators all across the state as to what they're talking about. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But as you've rightfully outlined, I am the father of 4 young children. Of 4 children that I think deserve to inherit a country as great as the one that my parents and their generation left us. And that's really what we're debating here at the end of the day. If you look at the numbers, they're absolutely startling. And I think these numbers have been said before, but you can't say them enough. $14.3 trillion of debt. Trillion is not a number or a figure I've ever used in my life until I got to Washington. I don't know where else in the world that applies other than in the United States Congress, the term trillion. $14.3 trillion is our debt. Our kids already owe $46,000, and my oldest is only 11. Already owes $46,000. Our total debt is about to reach the size of our entire economy. That's kind of the framework in which we're operating in when we discuss this. Now, I actually think we're closer to some sort of an agreement on this, Senator Ayotte, than a lot of people realize. I've heard the term thrown around in the last couple of days, a balanced approach to dealing with it. And I think there's agreement that there has to be a balanced approach. I certainly have always said that you cannot simply cut your way out of this problem. You have to have a combination of cuts and growth in revenues to government. I think the debate is, how do you accomplish these two things? And I'm not going to focus so much on the cut part of it today. I want to focus on the revenue part of it, because that's the part the President and some of my colleagues here have focused on over the last day, this idea of getting more revenue, or this new term, revenue enhancers, which is Washington talk for more money to the government. And according to the president, some in his party, most in his party, I should say, the idea is simple. They think that there's a bunch of people out there in America that are making a lot of money, more money than maybe they should be making, and they just need to pay more in taxes. And if these people pay more in taxes, then all these problems will get a lot easier to deal with. That's kind of the viewpoint they bring to this debate. Yesterday we saw, and I know tomorrow the majority leader will be voting here on the floor on something the majority leader has offered up, something called the sense of the Senate, which people watching at home may wonder, what is that? Well, that basically means what's on the Senate's mind. And the sense of the Senate under this thing that we're going to be voting on tomorrow is basically that you've got a bunch of people in this country that make over $1 million, and that these people need to do more to help with the debt. That's basically the sense of the Senate that there's going to be a vote on tomorrow. It's very interesting things. So I looked at it because ultimately this is a serious issue. So let's explore this with an open mind. Let's not be doctrinaire, right? Let's not be blindly ideological. Let's look at this from a common sense perspective. This idea that all these millionaires and billionaires, if they just paid more taxes, these problems would be solved. And let's analyze it, because this is all about math. And here's the fact. The fact is, it doesn't solve the problem. First of all, if you taxed these people at 100%, if basically next year you said, look, every penny you make next year, the government's going to take it from you, it still doesn't solve the debt. Not only does that not solve the debt problem, but I looked at a host of others, some great publication that came out today from the Joint Economics Committee. Our colleague Senator DeMint chairs it. And it kind of outlines some of the tax increases being proposed by our colleagues in the Democratic Party and the President to solve the debt problem. And you add them all up. You add all of these things up, the jet airplanes, the oil companies, all the other things they talk about. You put them all together in one big batch, and you know what it does? It basically deals with 9 days and 23 hours worth of deficit spending. 9 days and 20, it doesn't even get to 10 days of deficit spending. That's how much it solves. So all this talk about going after people that make all this money, it buys you 9 days and 23 hours. Let's round it off. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It buys them 10 days of deficit spending reduction. That's what all this stuff rounds up to. So here's the bottom line. These tax increases they're talking about, these so-called revenue enhancers, they don't solve the problem. So what do we do then? Because clearly we have to do two things. One, we have to hold the line on spending. I mean, if you keep digging yourself in the hole is going to bury you. But the other thing is, how do you start generating revenue for government so it can start paying down this debt? And that's what the debate should be about. We already know these taxes they're talking about don't work. So here's what works. Here's what I would suggest works in a balanced approach, using the President's terminology. Let's stop talking about new taxes and start talking about creating new taxpayers, which basically means jobs. Now, here in Washington, this debt is the #1 issue on everyone's mind, and rightfully so. It is a major issue. But everywhere else in the real world, the #1 issue on people's minds are jobs. And I'll tell you, every other problem facing America, a mortgage crisis, home foreclosure crisis, this debt problem, all of these issues get easier to deal with if people are gainfully employed across America. And the impact that unemployment's having across this country is devastating. We hear about unemployment in facts and figures. They give us numbers, Senator Ayotte. Oh, X% people are unemployed. Well, there's stories behind every one of those people. You know who a lot of these people are that are unemployed in America? There are people that have done everything they've been asked to do, and they've done it right. Maybe they served their country overseas. Maybe they went to college and got a degree and now came back home. Maybe they worked for 10 or 20 years and did a really good job at work, and now you know what? They can't find a job. Or maybe they were lucky enough to find a job after losing their original job, but it pays them half as much and they work twice as long. That is the real face of unemployment in America, of people that are hurting. And our job here is to do everything we can to make it easier for them to find a job, not harder. And I think that's what we have to do when it comes to a balanced approach and when we talk about revenue. We don't need new taxes. We need new taxpayers, people that are gainfully employed, making money and paying into the tax system. And then we need a government that has the discipline to take that additional revenue and use it to pay down the debt and never grow it again. And that's what we should be focused on, and that's not what we're not focused on. So you look at all these taxes that are being proposed, and here's what I say. I say we should analyze every single one of them through the lens of job creation, issue #1 in America. I want to know which one of these taxes that they're proposing will create jobs. I want to know how many jobs are going to be created by the plane tax. How many jobs? are going to be created by the oil company tax that I heard so much about? How many jobs are created by going after the millionaires and billionaires that the president talks about? I want to know, how many jobs do they create? Because I'll tell you, and I'm going to turn it over to Senator Ayotte in a second, because I'm interested for her perspective on this as a job creator, as the spouse of a job creator who runs a small business, as someone like me who just came off the campaign trail. Let me tell you something. I traveled the state of Florida for 2 years campaigning. I have never met a job creator who told me that they were waiting for the next tax increase before they started growing their business. I've never met a single job creator who's ever said to me, I can't wait till government raises taxes again so I can go out and create a job. And I'm curious to know if they say that in New Hampshire, because they don't say that in Florida. And so my view on all this is I want to know how many jobs these tax increases the president proposes will create, because if they're not creating jobs and they're not creating new taxpayers, they're not solving the problem. Senator Ayotte, I don't know what your perspective is on that.
Senator Rubio, you know, I couldn't agree more with what my colleague from Florida has said, that we need to create a positive climate to create jobs. But one thing we do know is that that doesn't happen by more spending in Washington. The recent report that came out about the president's stimulus package has shown that it costs $278,000 per job created by that stimulus package, and yet we had to borrow so much money, nearly $1 trillion, to create a limited number of jobs that cost us $278,000 a job. I do come from a small business family, and my husband started a landscaping and snow plowing business. I work with him to start that business. And New Hampshire is a small business state. As I campaigned up and down our state, I talked to so many small business owners, and I never had a small business owner tell me that they were being taxed too little. Please tax me more. What I did hear was too many burdensome regulations from Washington were coming down and making it difficult for our small businesses to thrive and grow. And frankly, some of the taxes coming down from Washington making it difficult. You know, in the health care bill, there was a tax on medical device companies. New Hampshire has nearly 50 of those companies. And what I heard from those companies, and I've heard that even more recently, the tax in that health care bill on medical device companies is going to take away significant amounts of their research and development budget to create new products that will improve the quality of our health care and save lives. So the actions we're taking in Washington, we need to create a positive climate for our small businesses, not thinking that we create the jobs here in Washington. We know that it's the small businesses and the hardworking entrepreneurs and those that have a great idea in this country in the private sector that create those jobs. And they don't need more taxes and burdens from Washington. What we need to do is, frankly, get out of their way and allow them to thrive and grow and to create jobs for all of our children going forward. Senator Rubio, I don't know if you heard from businesses in Florida about the regulatory concerns and burdens from Washington hurting economic growth in the private sector.
Well, the truth is that throughout the campaign and even now, that's what I hear all the time from people, is that these regulations are making it harder, not easy, for them to create jobs. That, combined with the uncertainty of the tax code. They don't know what the taxes are going to be next year, but they read the newspaper, they listen to the news, and every time they hear talk about this tax increase stuff, it scares job creators. They make the decision, well, wait, you know what, maybe this is not the year to hire people, because we still don't know how much it's going to cost to hire people. The other great phrase here, you know, both Senator Ayotte and I have only been here a few months, so I think we're still learning the language of Washington. I hope it never becomes part of my permanent vocabulary, but one of the things that I have been hearing recently is this notion of everything should be on the table, which is funny because everything is not on the table, according to the president and others. For example, there's no serious discussion of a spending cap. I'd love to have a vote right. Why don't we have a vote on the balanced budget amendment? Why is that not on the table? Why is a balanced budget amendment not on the table? Why aren't we voting on that tomorrow? Because a balanced budget amendment basically says you can't spend money you don't have, which makes all the sense in the world to the rest of the people that live in the real world. But apparently that doesn't apply here, and the result is these problems that we face. But I actually think some things should be off the table. Let me tell you what should be off the table. Bad ideas. If something is a bad idea, it shouldn't be on the table. And I think it's a bad idea to pass things that are going to make it harder to hire people. How much higher do they want unemployment to be? So here's, I think, what we have to ask ourselves. These tax increases that, as Senator Ayotte rightfully pointed out, along with the regulations, kill job creation in America. These tax increases don't do anything about the debt. They don't raise enough money to do anything significant about the debt. They don't create jobs. In fact, they kill them. So how could tax increases that they're outlining be a part of a solution? Why is it being offered? Because ultimately, these are smart people. They know the math. And I think the answer lies in the politics of all this. The politics of all this is pretty clear. This appears to be an effort to save face. The reality is that everyone here knows there's going to have to be some spending reduction at some level because we have a spending problem. The reason why we're in the mess that we're in today with our debt is not because Americans don't pay enough in taxes. It's because we spend more money than we have at an alarming rate. Not a little bit more than we have, a lot more than we have. So there's going to have to be some spending reductions. And it appears to me that the president and others in his party are positioning and are looking for some pound of flesh in return for these cuts so they can go back to their political base and say, look what we got. We got something out of this. We went after the people that made all this money. We went after the greedy billionaires and millionaires. We went after the oil companies, even though it has nothing to do with the debt. That's the only explanation for why this is even on the table. I think all bad ideas should be off the table. I think anything that kills jobs should be off the table. I think anything that hurts the ability of job creators to grow their business should be off the table. I think anything that helps increase the unemployment rate should be off the table. I think that's what should be off the table. I think anything that hurts our ability to grow our economy should be off the table. And I hope what should be on the table are things that force this government once and for all to put itself back on the path of sanity. Sanity basically means that we stop having a government that spends money it does not have. And I'll turn it over to Senator Ayotte to close, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to do this because I thought it was important to bring these points to the floor here today.
I want to thank Senator Rubio for his leadership on this issue and for the important issues that he has raised here today, because he's absolutely right that the class warfare is unproductive. The proposals that the president has made are not serious in terms of how much revenue they would even address, not even 10 days of our debt. And unfortunately, right now, the leader of the Senate, what he has brought forward is a resolution, a non-binding sense of the Senate that does nothing to address the spending in Washington. And we are spending over 24% of our GDP or our economy right now. We've historically spent about 20% of our GDP. So our spending is way out of line for where we have spent over the 40-year historical level of our spending. And common sense, why not a balanced budget amendment? Why aren't we addressing that this week in the Senate instead of a non-binding resolution that, again, will have no effect, has no effect, won't reduce our deficit, won't help create any jobs, will not help our economy thrive? We should be addressing real legislation. A balanced budget amendment, I couldn't agree with my colleague from Florida more about living within our means. Families sit around their kitchen table, they make the tough decisions, they see the revenue coming in and the expenditures out, and Washington should do the same. Spending caps to ensure that we get ourselves, put those handcuffs on Congress to make sure that we're not spending this drastic 24% of our GDP right now and really bringing ourselves on a more responsible spending path going forward. And a budget resolution. It's been nearly 2 years since the Senate has passed a budget. No business would run without a budget. Families make budgets, but here in the United States Senate, what we should be bringing to the floor is a real budget resolution that the parties can debate and put ourselves on a responsible fiscal path going forward, rather than voting on a sense of the Senate that will, again, not have any impact in the full force of law. With this deadline coming up for August 2nd, it is time for real legislative proposals and solutions. We put some of the ideas out there: balanced budget, cap amendment, a real budget resolution, and I hope that my colleagues from the other side of the aisle will come forward so we can work together to address this fiscal crisis here and now, so that my children, Senator Rubio's children, will have the same and greater opportunities than all of our children and grandchildren in the greatest country on earth. Thank you, Mr. President.